Welcome to Reading the Bible Together, and today we're wrapping up the story of Noah and the Great Flood with Genesis chapter 9. And I wish I could tell you it has a happy ending, but, well, maybe we better take a look. The chapter starts with a blessing, we're told, but upon close inspection, it's a reiteration of the command given by God to all of humanity in Genesis chapter 1, to be fruitful and multiply, to fill the earth. But there's an important change. The earth is no longer paradise. Listen. The fear and dread of you will fall on all the beasts of the earth and on all the birds of the sky, on every creature that moves along the ground, and on all the fish in the sea. They are given into your hands. Now that's quite a change from the harmony in the Garden of Eden when God brought all the animals before Adam, who gave them all names. Well, now, despite the flood, the relationship between humanity and the animal world is marred. Fear and dread have replaced harmony. The land, we read in chapter 3, is already uncooperative. It will only give of its sustenance after sweat and toil. All of life will now be a struggle. And now another development, perhaps from which the fear and dread experienced by the beasts of the earth arises. We read, "Everything that lives and moves about will be food for you. Just as I gave you the green plants, I now give you everything." Now, up to this point, creation, human and animal alike, is pictured as vegetarian. Back in chapter 1, right after the creation of humanity, we read, "I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. And to all the beasts of the earth, and all the birds of the sky, and all the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has the breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food." Seeds, fruits, green plants. But now, everything that lives and moves about will be food for you. Just as I gave you the green plants, I now give you everything. Worldwide vegetarianism in a single verse comes to an end. Now, interestingly, there are denominations, such as the Seventh-day Adventists, who have as a core teaching the practice of vegetarianism as bringing us closer to the original plan for humanity. Even if you take these verses at face value, they have a point. But what these verses do represent, in fact, is a change in God's position as much as ours. Realizing that every inclination of the human heart, as we heard in chapter 8, is evil from childhood, rather than destroy everything again, trying to bring things back to that original state of paradise, God decides to work with humanity and the world as it is. "Fine," says God, "eat meat." Creation, by the evil in humanity's heart, is divided, but it will not be destroyed by God. Perhaps God anticipated our own efforts to destroy it. We seem to be doing a pretty good job. The freedom of the garden is now replaced by rules. You can eat meat, but the meat must not contain the lifeblood of the animal before it is consumed. God will demand an accounting. Further, we read, "And from each human being, too, I will demand an accounting for the life of another human being. Whoever sheds human blood, by humans shall their blood be shed, for in the image of God has God made mankind." Despite their fallen state, there's still something of the image of God within humanity. The wholesale slaughter of other people, endorsed by, for instance, Lamech at the end of Genesis chapter 4, will now carry a consequence. Nevertheless, the basic commandment is restated yet again. "As for you, be fruitful and increase in number, multiply upon the earth and increase upon it." So that's our responsibility. And now God lays out his end of the bargain with all of creation. Never again will all life be destroyed by the waters of a flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth. Tried that, didn't work, seems to be the message. When the covenant is repeated a second time, and this time to seal the deal, God gives a sign. "Whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it, and I will remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures of every kind on the earth." So, with the rain which once brought destruction, comes the rainbow, the reminder of God's covenant, God's bow, Kasheth, In Hebrew, it's the same word as the kind of bow that you use in war. Instead, kasheth, the same word for bow of war, becomes the sign of peace. So the story ends there, really, but now the J tradition has a bit more to add. Instead of ending with this statement of God's grace, in verses 18 through 27, J, using specific J language, is going to illustrate how little has in fact improved. What happens is we are introduced briefly to Noah's sons Ham, Shem, and Japheth. Chapter 10 will tell us more. It appears as though Noah, described here as a man of the soil, a least likely man of the soil, it must be said. For thousands of years, Noah has perhaps been best known as the most famous boat builder and sailor of all time. But here, Noah returns to his pre-ark profession, and he plants a vineyard. After an unspecified period of time, grapes are harvested. Noah immediately brews up a batch of wine, through which he becomes sufficiently drunk as to pass out naked in his tent. Eldest son Ham, checking on his dad, finds the old man lying in shame, has a good laugh at his account, and calls the other brothers in to have a look, a sign of tremendous disrespect of the family unit. But the others react differently. We read, "But Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it across their shoulders. Then they walked in backward and covered their father's naked body. Their faces were turned the other way, so they would not see their father naked." Now, all this naked talk should turn our minds back to Adam and Eve in the garden, who, of course, at one time were naked, but then we found them hiding from God, ashamed at their nakedness. "Who told you you were naked?" is God's surprising response. Adam and Eve's shameless nudity had been once one of their signs of unity with creation, a reflection of their innocence. Since their disobedience with the forbidden fruit, innocence was destroyed and shame entered the world. Was Noah in his drunkenness trying to return to such a time? It's no longer possible. The damage has been done. The human heart has taken the innocence of nakedness, the most basic natural condition of the human state, and has marred it, commodified it, exploited it. The days of innocence are gone. It's hard to say whether Noah drank to remember the days of innocence or to forget the horror of the flood. Shem and Japheth, to preserve their father's dignity, covered their dad, averting their eyes. And when Noah finally awoke, head pounding, he laid a curse upon Ham, or more specifically on Ham's son, Canaan. Now, why is this Canaan's fault? Well, it's Middle Eastern practice to adopt the name of your son as your own. For instance, a friend of mine in Bethlehem is known as Isa Musa Abu Daud. Now, Isa Musa is his given name. Abu Daud means the father of the son David. And Isa Musa's son's name is David. And so now his name is Isa Musa Abu Daud. And when I'm in Bethlehem and I ask around for Isa Musa, people will look confused until I say Abu Daud, at which point they go, "Oh, Abu Daud." And then he's over having a coffee at Stars and Bucks. So the curse upon Ham comes through his title of Abu Canaan. Abu Canaan. Now, to make this clear, the story points out a few verses earlier that Ham is the father of Canaan, just in case we missed this. So who are the Canaanites, which is to say, who will they become, this cursed tribe? Well, surprise, surprise, the ancestors of all the traditional enemies of the Hebrews. That's who they are. But chapter 10 will tell us more about them. They're going to have to wait till then. What our chapter ends with is the end of Noah after a grueling 350 years of post-flood existence. He managed to eke out a total of 950 years altogether, making the list of the top 3 of longest lived, according to those biblical genealogy and Genesis accounts. The story of the drunken episode in the tent leaves us with the impression that while Noah's years were many, the happy years among them may well have been few. We will see you next time for Genesis chapter 10.